Well, if you think private school owners are having a nice time, you need to listen to this. This is what the Deputy National President of the National Association of Proprietors of Private Schools, Yomi Otubela, he says schools are struggling with loans they got from banks, and says that none of them can break even after 10 to 15 years of saying they needed loans that would span up to 20 or 25 years, because the current loans they secure from banks are not long enough to help them stay in business. This is part of the problems of education funding in Nigeria. Uche Waleke is the professor of capital markets. He's live to us from Abuja studios. He's of the Nasarawa State University. Professor, let's continue this conversation. Now we're delving into the various funding options that we should have, or we could have, to fund education. So you've said earlier that the annual budgetary funding is not enough. We need to increase it, but again, that's not enough. So let's talk about bank loans for those who want to set up schools. Do you think the banking sector, the financial services industry can help out?
Yes, I think so. Of course, banks by their nature are not inclined, they're not oriented towards long-term loans. These schools require long-term loans. That's also a part of why I argue that if we must invest in education in this country, we don't need to take short-term loans to invest in education. We don't need to issue Eurobonds, for example, 5-year Eurobond, 7-year Eurobond, to invest in education. The investment in education requires very long-term loans. They are the kind of loans we get from multilateral institutions, 30 years with moratorium periods, and so on. Now, with respect to the banks, as I said earlier on, that is not their nature, except the banks are assisted to do that. What easily comes to my mind is the differentiated cash reserve ratio that the central bank introduced not too long ago, where companies that lend money to, or banks that lend money to firms for a 7-year period, a minimum, get a refund from their cash reserve ratio. So this can be extended to, not just manufacturing and agri sectors, but also to, private schools. But again, that's also not enough. A 7-year loan from a bank is not enough. So the best option, therefore, if you're talking about long-term facilities, is the capital market, which is also why I did a piece not too long ago saying that universities too can leverage the capital market, for alternative funding. And what I meant, by that is that universities should identify their commercial activities, identify commercial activities, and then borrow to fund those activities. And then from it, you can, of course, service whatever debt that you have taken. And of course, too, if a university is approaching the capital market for loan, it's unlikely that university will get such money, because number one, our universities are not ranked and they are not rated. And that is why I suggested too that for that to happen, if you take the first generation universities, for example, ABU or University of Lagos or University of Nigeria, for example, going to the capital market, those bonds should be government-backed. If a university takes a loan from the capital market, a long-term loan from the capital market, say 15-year loan from the capital market or 20-year loan from the capital market, it should be, it should have government backing, and then the university will now plow it into a commercial venture that will, fetch some revenue, with which not only to service but also to fund other aspects of the university. Overseas, that is now the trend. In the US, for example, we've seen many of these Ivy League universities, approaching the capital market, whether it is MIT, whether it is Harvard, whether it is Yale, Stanford, Princeton, and so on. In the UK, the same. Not too long ago, Oxford University issued a 100-year bond. And in Australia, the University of Melbourne just issued $250 million bond, with which is upgraded its facilities. So I'm saying that can also work in Nigeria. I was on accreditation assignment at ABU, not too long ago, and as part of our we were inspecting the facilities, and they took us to their entrepreneurship center that is located in their Congo campus. In the entrepreneurship center, they showed us their bread making factory, where the machines there are machines fabricated by students of that university, and of course some of them too. They said they acquired from China. So, and we, of course, the entrepreneurship center, the bread section, we understand, supplies this bread to the entire university community and even the surrounding communities. So, if they get enough capital, for example, for that type of venture that is commercial oriented, they can expand it, to the point where it becomes a profit-oriented thing. And of course, money from there can also be used to put in research, put in teaching, and so on. So we need to have these innovative approaches to funding. The idea of people have also suggested, why don't you share cost? For me, education, first and foremost, is a public good, and I don't believe once you begin to say you want to share the full cost of education between students and the government, then you reduce access. And access is very important, as far as education is concerned. So what we need to do is to continue to provide funding, and then where there are commercial activities, we can assess the capital market to be able to do that.
Okay, Professor, let's look at one strategy. Professor, just respectfully, sorry, because of time. Some years ago, there was this approach which the Nigerian Stock Exchange proposed with the then Ministry of Education, which was called Adopt a School Initiative, which then, of course, the then Minister of Education came to the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and the whole idea was to say, look, companies that are listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Nestle, Nigerian Breweries, Guinness, whatever, First Bank, and the rest, can adopt a school and fund whatever is needed there in a public-private partnership kind of, or private-to-private sector arrangement. Do you think we can bring something like that back to the private sector for the government to say, look, let's do and adopt a school initiative?
Yes, absolutely, Boasen. You see, if we must bridge the gap between the town and the gown, we must bring in the private sector to complement the efforts of the government. The private sector should be encouraged to endow chairs and also fund research activities in our educational system. So I think it is something that we should give attention to, especially given the huge gap between the universities and tertiary institutions in general and the private sector.